This is the Last Temptation of John podcast, and as you know by now, I am the Apostle John. I want to welcome you to the show. Now, I'm currently reading through the trilogy of books I've written, and this is an audiobook podcast. So if you haven't started with Chapter 1, I recommend you go back and do that now. In today's show, I'm going to read to you from Book 1, Chapters 13 through 15. All right, let's get started. Gee whiz, now why did you sidetrack me like that with all those questions in the last chapter? Don't you know I've got a job to do here? Now where were we? Oh yeah, that's right. Miriam was whining again about how I never help her. Bells from afar softly sounded, signaling the midday meal. As I refocused my vision, I saw Miriam. Her eyes were closed, her hands were in her lap, and as usual, she was talking to herself. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. And then Miriam opened her eyes. Even still, she didn't venture out for lunch. She's probably fasting again. That's Saint Miriam for you. I watched as she rose from her chair and then moved closer to her desk. Although it was a simple secretary table, her desk was hand-carved from chapa wood, and like most of the articles in this Tibetan palace, it was ornately worked. In this case, the legs were covered with scrollwork, and the desk panel itself had a border of miscellaneous Buddhist symbols. I don't know what they were, but they were outside the main writing area all around it. A few other items sat atop Miriam's workstation. There was a small stack of airmail stationery. Oh, Jesus. A single pen and one large leather-bound book. You see, it was that last item that Miriam now reached for, pulling the heavy tome towards her. Once positioned, I watched her reach up to her neck, and then from inside her pale green robe, she withdrew a chain that held a tiny key. Taking the chain from off her neck, she inserted the key into the lock that held the book fast. With a soft click, the massive tome gave up its security, and Miriam was free to open it however she pleased. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, O God. And Miriam fearfully opened the book. Then she quickly sought to find her bookmark, which was in the last quarter of this giant omnibus. Yet upon locating her bookmark, I saw the color drain from her face, for the pages of the book were blank. I could have told you that, Miriam. Come on, you should know this. And then, knowing that all the pages after this one would also be blank, Miriam steeled herself as she flipped backwards to an earlier page. It's blank as well. Miriam gasped as she looked as if a knife stabbed her in the heart. Oh gosh, again with the dramatics. I'm telling you, this lady never stops. Once again, the tears were returning, and Miriam slowly continued to leaf backwards in the book. Miriam went back 3 full pages from her previous mark until she finally found names again. And so the number is down to 182,107. And she was sobbing. But then I watched as a fountain of anger seemed to rise up within her. Why, Lord? Why must it only be 144,000? How can you do nothing and allow so many people to be lost? Don't you care, God? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? Arise, arise, O Lord. Lift up your hand, O God. Do not forget the helpless. Do not forget us. Okay, now I've told Miriam for centuries that God is no longer listening to us and that He doesn't care. I've also told her that there can only be 144,000 who are saved. And I know Gabriel has told her the same thing time and time again. But Miriam doesn't listen. Just like any other woman, right? After a short time, Miriam gave up in her quest, knowing full well that there was nothing she could do that would change a future that had already been predetermined. And so, closing the book for another day, Miriam sighed. The crucible for silver and gold, but the Lord tests the heart. As always, I will be still and know that He is God. Once more I watched Miriam lock up her big, heavy book, and then move it back to its place on the desk. After which she arose and readied herself for her midday prayers with the rest of the palace. And that's when my vision ended. Once again, I learned nothing new. It was another waste of my time, like all the other visions. Hey, back again. That's interesting to see you. Well, listen, another day, another vision. I mean, I usually don't get pummeled like this unless something big is afoot, so I guess this isn't a good sign, but hey, at least this vision is interesting. So listen now, the date is June 12th, and we're just hopping right along. This is chapter 14 in my diary, and I'm calling this one The Best Laid Plans. We got another vision of Benedict. Isn't that cool? Let's go. As my vision focused in on the Vatican, I could see that the smell of Boswellian incense was embracing Pope Benedict's robes as he tarried back to his private quarters. No, I don't have a smell-o-vision in my revelations. Hold on, and you'll see how I knew this fact. Benedict sneezed again. You understand how I knew? Horasan, Benedict swore in his native dialect, leaning on his cane for support. Why do we use such strong ash? And he rubbed hard at his nose with his handkerchief. Ugh, Father, forgive me, but if Cardinal Renoir waves his censer in my direction next time, I'll excommunicate the Teufel. Later that evening, after Benedict was able to shower, I watched as he once more engaged with some fellow conspirators. This time his visitors were not two men who looked like a pair of Hitler's Aryan army, but instead a young woman and an older gentleman. Now, the woman was a gorgeous brunette whose silky hair covered her face, yet could not obscure her beauty. Although I couldn't tell for sure, I'm guessing that this was none other than Miss Terry Abrachievento. You remember her from her escapades with Alan, right? Now, interestingly enough, the woman bore a striking resemblance to the older man who sat beside her. He was a scholarly type. He looked like the classic European university professor. He had bushy gray eyebrows, a bulbous Italian nose, brill-creamed gray hair, and one of those tweed suits with the elbows that are patched. I mean, he was like a living cliché. I noticed Benedict snickering to himself, and I wondered if he was amused at the same thing I was. I mean, assuming this really was Terry Abrachievento, I wondered, did her father know what his daughter had been up to lately? For his part, the Pope scratched his cat Dieter behind the ears as he quipped, "Blessed is the man whose sin the Lord does not count against him. So how is death treating you, Antonio?" "Death is quite inconvenient," the oldster replied. "Were you aware that I can't get an identichip? Apparently my fingerprints prove that I am dead. How am I supposed to buy anything once hard currency goes away?" "Father, I told you that you have nothing to worry about." The woman leaned over to pat his hand. "Your death was necessary. We've already discussed this. You can still use your Bitcoin, and meanwhile Benedict's people will see to all your needs, just as they have always done. Right, Your Highness?" "Terry is correct," Benedict agreed. "You have no need to worry, Antonio. Your mind is too valuable to have it waste on such trifles. Bitcoin still works, but if you really want an identichip, we'll get you one of those too." "Well, I should hope so," Antonio Abrachievento nodded. "Bitcoin rather scares me. There's nothing backing it. I'd much rather have an identichip from Dr. Maybu. After all, he guarantees that with the Human League's Trimarks, and those are in turn backed up by the country's massive gold reserves." The Pope smiled knowingly to himself. "Maybu's gold reserves may not be as big as—" "Father sometimes likes to invent things," Terry interrupted. "If his mind is not always at work, he gets frustrated, so he's always thinking of new conspiracies." "Figlia mine, I do no such," Antonio began. "In any case," Benedict glanced down at his watch, "I've read your briefing about Lazarus, so what is his current status?" I thought to myself as I watched these guys conspire. So, was Joe involved in Alan's recent troubles? Meanwhile, I tuned in again, as Terry smiled slyly. "Ah, yes, Alan was a nice assignment. Although I didn't get to consummate—" Here she glanced at her father. "Well, the important thing is that we have him secured." Staring off into space, the Pope pondered as he said to Terry, "I wonder, does Alan suspect anything about me?" And all the while, Dieter nudged up against him, demanding more cat caresses. "No, he believes you still to be as innocent as a baby goat," Terry replied. 2 millennia is a long time to live for anyone, the Pope said. I'm sure that Bruder Lazarus will thank us for helping him get on to the afterlife. Now I was taken aback. Joe, if I thought you could really end our lives, I'd be the first one at your door. But you can't do it, so whatever you're planning, it won't work. Meanwhile, Terry interrupted my thoughts. So long as I get his immortal seed first, Pota! Antonio could stand it no more as he looked at his daughter. Enough of such talk before I smack you. I am what I am, Terry said defiantly to her father. Of all people, you should know that much. My friends, Benedict played the peacemaker, let us keep our eye on the prize. Antonio, the time is near. The end game is brewing. The first check is about to occur. What is the latest from the prophets? Well, I've read the transcripts and I've viewed their video streams several times, Antonio replied. It's clear that Elijah and Enoch continue to deteriorate, and it's a sad sight to see such great men destroyed. It's as if history is being reversed. I took a step back from this vision. I was confused. So this Antonio Abbracciavento is now in league with the mystery man who captured the prophets? I don't know what's going on. Is Joe that man from my visions? If so, I didn't see that twist coming. Meanwhile, the Pope was talking again. Antonio, history is not being reversed. I prefer to say corrected. Eh? Antonio was confused, and me as well. History is being corrected, I said. Elijah and Enoch, they were certainly extraordinary men, the Pope was explaining. But don't you see, they've had their time. They were taken up body and soul to heaven and then preserved for this very mission. They knew what they were getting into, my friends. Nothing in his universe is free, and even we will have to earn our fare before this ride is over. Well, I should hope my work has been enough to stamp my ticket into the kingdom, the professor grumbled, and my daughter's as well. We shall see, Benedict shrugged, but who knows what tomorrow may bring. In any case, please continue, my friend. Has there been a new prophecy? Well, it seems... Yes, Benedict pressed, hungry for news. I watched as the color drained from Antonio's face. The 7 seals will soon... be broken. And so it continues, Benedict nodded, although he too shuddered at the teacher's words. Actually, guys, this is big news. Trust me. Remember, I wrote the book of Revelation, so I know about the 7 seals. If you don't know about it, go to my website, temptationofjohn.com. I got a video posted there about the 7 seals. Believe me, when you see it, you'll know this is not good. Listen, this is the first vision in quite some time that actually captured my attention. I wonder, what's going to happen next? Okay, well, we've got some action going on in my diary, and even I'm excited to read it again. So we're now on chapter 15. It's still June 12th. I'm calling this chapter the Grand Master, kind of a little tribute to Pope Benedict. So my vision of Benedict and his fellow conspirators was continuing, and after the professor's revelation about the 7 seals, I watched as all 3 of these conspirators turned inward. Seems like they were examining their thoughts. You know, the old professor, Antonio Abbracciavento, he seemed to realize that the subject he had devoted his life to was apparently unfolding before his very eyes, although now it appeared he didn't have the stomach for it. Meanwhile, Terry seemed to be relishing every moment, and as for Benedict, well, it was obvious that he still had a major part to play before he could finally retire to that much-desired rest. You know, I couldn't help thinking of that famous proverb from King Solomon. He who digs a hole falls into his own pit. Now eventually, Antonio spoke further about the terrible implications of the 7 seals, and for the most part he explained my work quite well. Yet it was all he could do to hold himself together, and he shook noticeably during his monologue. For his part, Pope Benedict listened stoically, detaching himself from the grim horrors that the professor was describing. And then once Antonio finished, the Pope added his thoughts. Dreadful? Yes. Necessary? Absolutely. After all, my friends, we must remember, the sheep were made to be shorn. It is their role to play in the great play, correct? All things work together for the good. Antonio patted his daughter's hand as if trying to console her, yet I knew he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Benedict cautioned him, "You are not responsible for this, Antonio. Just because you have the foreknowledge of the crime doesn't make you guilty of it." The oldster was about to reply, but it seemed he got tongue-tied instead, and I looked like the Pope also sensed Antonio's fear, for Benedict kept going. "Sharing what you know with the world will not stop events from happening. Please don't think of such a foolish thing, Professor." At this point, Terry looked at her father in horror. "Papa, you were not contemplating this, were you?" Again, Antonio stuttered, further convicting himself. "Fool," I thought. "Don't you realize that God has a plan and things will happen in God's time and God's time alone? These people realize we are all just the pawns of prophecy, whether we like it or not. And that's why I don't care anymore. After all, it doesn't matter what Antonio does, what Pope Benedict does, what Terry, me, or anybody does. God already knows how this will all turn out. Don't you people realize this?" "Control of yourself, Abbracciavento," the Pope grated. "You would be a fool to reveal such knowledge to the world. No one would believe you, and more importantly, the wheel of time will turn. December 22nd will arrive regardless of what you do." "Father will do no such thing," Terry quickly changed the subject. "And speaking of December 21st, wouldn't you like to hear about Dr. Mabou?" "That rascal is proving to be quite a genius, eh?" Pope Benedict said. "Indeed, he's becoming a power by literally buying the world," Terry explained. "Everybody wants the Trimark, eh?" Pope Benedict chuckled. "Did you know that many nations have stopped accepting trade unless they are paid in Trimarks?" Terry admired. "Nobody has confidence in the financial backing of any country, except Mabou's U-Man League. That's why people are so desperate to be implanted with an identichip, and why the UN is actually recommending it. So Mabou has the world by the balls, and now the UN wants us to sell our souls to Mabou. Is that it?" Benedict summarized. "And yet I say, what the wicked dread will overtake them. Yet let it be so, friends. Let's not lose sight of our own prize." Your Grace, when will this all happen?" Antonio asked. "Well, I would bet Mabou's going to have Ban Ki-moon removed, and soon," the Pope replied. "Assassination of the Secretary General?" the professor gasped. "Father, don't interrupt him," Terry hushed. "Well, that would be the next logical move," the Pope explained, making a motion to wash his hands of the matter a la Pontius Pilate. "And there's really nothing we can do to stop it. As I said, the wheel of time will move forward of its own accord, and once Ki-moon is out of the way, the picture becomes much clearer for our adversary. Mabou will be elevated to power just in time for our great ceremony," Terry smiled. My children," the professor interrupted, "I'm afraid you are already mistaken, for Mabou has already declined that position. I mean, even if he wanted it, surely Presidents Trump and Putin would block such a move. Those two are always conspiring." "Mabou as Secretary General is inevitable," Benedict reaffirmed. "I'm surprised you didn't see this coming, Antonio. The world is in turmoil. It needs one person to step up and draw us together under the banner of peace and security. Who else could it be but Ghazal Ridwan Mabou? Oh, sure, he makes a pretense of resisting, but in reality only because his time has not yet come. He will accept the post when it is laid at his feet, when the world begs him to take over, and with your pawns, Trump and Putin, leading the way. Father, I've already told you the Brotherhood has been pumping Mabou up quite overtly throughout Africa," Terry reminded. "They're also building anti-Asian sentiment against Ki-moon among the radical factions of Europe. Additionally, both Trump and Putin are playing their parts. It's all going according to plan. Plus, you already know this, Father. Why are you being so difficult?" Okay, I took a step back from this vision. I'm really confused here. I guess if I'd been to any of the recent Brotherhood meetings, I would have known this too, but this is all news to me. Meanwhile, Benedict and his friends were talking again, so I paid attention. It was the professor speaking now. But how does this help our cause? I thought we were trying to destroy Mebu, not give him even more power. Benedict smiled. Professor, have you ever played Karpov? What do you mean? In chess? Antonio returned the question. Are you asking if I have played the Grandmaster Anatoly Karpov? Yes, Benedict confirmed. Well, the professor was confused. Why would Karpov waste his time with me? I'm no master. I played Karpov once, Benedict reminisced. 1984. You may not know this, but I actually did hold master rank during my youth, although it was unofficial given my religious position. In any case, the Grand Master taught me quite a lesson. For you see, Karpov's intentions became understandable to his opponents only when salvation was no longer possible. This is what happened to me. Karpov drew me in. He allowed me to rise to a position of power, and then he ruthlessly crucified me. Once he decided to make his move, his drive to mate was inevitable and certain. Mind you, at the very point when I felt that I was on the verge of setting up my mate of him, when I felt most secure and actually stole a breath, the very next instant he turned the tables on me, and his every successive move led to victory. The man was inexorable. And this is what we shall do to Mebu, Father, Terry giggled. Why, check and mate, Antonio agreed. Indeed, the Pope smiled. We'll give Mebu what he wants. We'll give him the world, for that is his destiny. But in the end, I'll take it back, for that is my destiny. My God, guys, I've got to say, although I was done with the commission, this vision really was interesting. I mean, hey, if the end days really are coming, and that's fine by me, perhaps they'll finally stop the insanity that's my life. Well, that's the end of our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Now be sure to visit our website at temptationofjohn.com, where you can read the full text version of this chapter. On our website, you'll find links to every podcast episode, and you can also join the Temptation of John book club. It's free to join, and you can get notified when new chapters are released. Again, you'll find all this and more at temptationofjohn.com.